everybody. Part two, about different addictions. And this is where the series starts getting really interesting as well. Because addiction isn't exclusively about putting chemicals in your body, which is what we touched on yesterday. Some behaviors can activate powerful reward, anticipation, and reinforcement systems too. For one, gambling. For example, you got sports betting, you got casinos, poker, slots, online gambling, lottery, betting apps. The hook on this isn't necessarily money, it's the anticipation. You see, the win gives you the dopamine reward. The excitement comes and then it's a repeat of that. The loss, you get that feeling of, I can win it back. You can change the losses. You place bigger bets and there's greater consequences. And eventually money becomes secondary to the emotional experience of gambling. The next one that we'll look at is pornography, or compulsive sexual behavior. And this can involve things like pornography, compulsive sexual behavior, excessive masturbation, repeated searching for increasingly stimulating material, compulsive sexual encounters. And this is one that people generally don't like to talk about. And the important distinction is that sexual desire itself isn't an addiction. The concern is when sexual behavior becomes compulsive, difficult to control, harmful, and repeatedly continued despite the many consequences. So what does a cycle look like? Well, you get the trigger, you get the craving, you start searching, the stimulation, the orgasm or reward, then it's the shame and the guilt and the emotional discomfort, and then the trigger again, and it starts all over again. The next one is the social media or the digital addiction. Potentially compulsive behaviors include things like constant scrolling, social media checking, short form videos, likes, comments, notification, and this all centers around online validation. The reinforcement on this is often variable. You don't know when the next interesting post or message or like or piece of information is coming. And that unpredictability can keep people checking. Gaming. This has become huge. Gaming can be very problematic when it progresses from recreation into things like compulsion and loss of control, neglect of responsibilities, social withdrawal, sleep disruption, financial problems, and just continuing without consequences. Online gaming can add powerful reward systems, such as your levels and achievements, your rewards, your status, competition, progression, and it just repeats itself. Food and binge eating. Who would have thought? Addiction. Food is complicated though, because unlike drugs, we can't abstain from food. Some people develop problematic relationships with highly palatable foods, sugar-heavy foods, binge eating, emotional eating, and a lot of addicts, when they get clean and sober, fall into this trap as well. You hit an emotion, you start eating. You get temporary relief, you feel guilt, you feel restriction, craving hits again, you start binge eating. This is an area where we'll need to be particularly careful not to oversimplify the science though, and I'm not an expert. Another one is compulsive shopping, also called compulsive buying behavior. This reward can come from the wanting and the searching, leading to the buying and the excitement, the temporary relief, the regret, because now you've lost the money, and you repeat that cycle. The purchase itself isn't always the point. Sometimes the anticipation of the purchase is the drug. Then work and achievement compulsion. That's another form of addiction. This is sometimes described as workaholism. And a person can become very dependent on things like achievement, productivity, recognition, success, being needed, avoiding stillness. See, but the deeper issue can be this sentence. if I'm not achieving something, I am not valuable. And that's a fascinating connection to recovery, because it shows how addiction can sometimes migrate from substances to behaviors. The next one we'll talk about, which is part 3, is the other addictions which we should discuss. And I'd also include these as problematic or compulsive behaviors, just while being careful not to label every intense habit as an addiction. So you have relationship / attachment obsession, which is constantly seeking validation or reassurance or emotional highs. Phone or internet compulsive use, repeated checking and inability to disengage. Exercise compulsion, exercise becoming compulsive despite injury or significant harm to your body. Risk taking, which is chasing adrenaline through dangerous behaviors. Online sexual or chat behavior, which is compulsive sexual messaging, sexting, campsites or similar sort of activities. Adrenaline seeking, stuff like extreme sports, dangerous driving, and other high-risk behaviors can become reinforcement loops, although they aren't automatically addictions, if I can put it like that. So I'd like to turn this into a 25-part recovery education series. And the substance talks will work like this. We'll do alcohol, then nicotine, cannabis, cocaine, crack cocaine, methamphetamine / tic, amphetamines, ecstasy, heroin, fentanyl and synthetic opioids, prescription opioids, benzos, GHB, inhalants / glue and solvents, hallucinogens, which a lot of us have used, dissociatives / ketamine, prescription stimulants, and other prescription / sedative drugs. And then on the behavioral addiction talks, we'll look at gambling, pornography, gaming, social media, food, compulsive shopping, work, and achievements. All right. And what we'll do is we'll follow the same framework for each conversation. We'll start off with what is it made of, how does it enter the body, what happens to the brain, what does the person experience, why does the person want more of it, the tolerance of it, the dependence. We'll obviously talk about withdrawals, short-term and long-term consequences, the psychological trap, because we've spoken about this, addiction can lie to you. We'll talk about the relapse cycle. We'll talk about what recovery looks like. We'll talk about how difficult recovery is. And we'll finish off with a recovery message. You see, I don't want to demonize the addict, but I do want to explain the addiction. Remember, I'm also a recovering addict, and I don't want us to look bad. I want this to be educational, and I want us to understand why these things happen. And this is important. A recovering addict sitting, listening to this should be able to hear that you weren't weak because your brain learned to crave something. But recovery means you now have to learn to live a different way. That is what I'm trying to achieve here. So that this gives us an educational series that covers the chemistry, the neuroscience, the behavior, the consequences, and most importantly, the roadblocks. And that is where we're going to go in this 25-part series, 26-part series, somewhere there. And please, let's not demonize the addict, like I just said. This is educational. It's to help, and hopefully we can save someone's life by understanding different addictions better. I love you guys. I'm looking forward to the series. Please, any questions, shout. I'm ready to answer.